What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and I'm super excited because today I am doing a whole bunch of track reviews from you guys, specifically my subscribers and people who are following me on my email list and downloaded my free guides and stuff. I want to give a big thank you to all of you who have supported my channel thus far, and I just hit 5,000 subscribers at the time of this recording, and so I wanted to do a little bit of a celebration and kind of go over some of your own music and provide some of my feedback. And a lot of you have submitted pieces. And originally I was thinking, I would pick and choose, maybe go through a random number generator and select some pieces. But, I thought that it would probably be better just to listen to all of them and give feedback to all of them. It might take me a little more time, but you know what? It's worth it because all of you have supported me. So, I want to give back a little bit. So what I got here is I've got my piano ready, Sonnet piano, and I've pulled up all the tracks. I'm going to have to do multiple parts for these because there are more than I can go through in one video. So this will be a multi-part series. And I think in this video, I'll just go through 10. So each video will go through 10 at a time. And in terms of the feedback, I'm going to try to cover a couple of parameters. So melody and harmony is like the actual music theory behind it. I'll also try to address some orchestration or arrangement things. And then finally the mix or the production overall, how it all sounds together. So forgive me if I don't cover every single parameter like I just mentioned. I'm going to kind of like share my first impressions and then hopefully offer some constructive criticism based on what I think might help elevate the piece to the next level. So without further ado, let's get into it. First, we have Gabriel's piece called Lave, which is a French title and I horribly mispronounced. But anyway, let's have a listen to it. Here we go. There we go, some ostinato stuff happening here. All right. Awesome. Thank you, Gabriel, for sending this in. So yeah, this piece definitely feels like it's like it's the background music to some sort of documentary or some type of movie scene. So naturally, I feel like the chord progression is one that continues to loop, right? And you don't have that much of a melody. I think the melody comes in more here in the second half, which seems to fit the documentary type of thing pretty well, because you don't want the overall piece to kind of step on the documentary and the film's toes. So what we want is for the music to play a supporting role. And for the most part, I think it really did that. Just a couple little things here. So I felt like in general, a lot of the instruments were a little bit close. They felt a little bit close, and that's just due to the nature of how those instruments are mic'd up, or kind of like the mic positions you chose for those specific instruments. So just be sure that, and especially in moments like these where you introduce higher percussion like the glockenspiel. So here, you hear how the strings are quite reverberant, right? You want to match that with the rest of your instruments. So there you're dun 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 dun, right? That type of melody there, it has some reverb on it actually, or you added some reverb. What you want to do is ensure that all the other instruments have a similar sort of tail so that it sounds consistent and within one room. Especially with orchestral music, this is the type of sound we're trying to go for. So you hear that ding, 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 ding. It sounds like it's very, very close. Like if I put that instrument right up to the microphone and recorded it, it would sound kind of like that. So you want it to sound like it's mixing with everything else. So you might want to choose some microphone positions that push it a little further back and also add some external reverb to it just to gel it all together. And also here at the beginning, there was a little, there were some panning things that I was wondering about. So here, by the way, it's interesting you chose to go with lower thirds here. Traditionally, this can tend to muddy up the mix, but when you're just doing those strings by themselves. So here you have your G and B flat. Oh, sorry, I'll go to my piano, right? You hear how that already starts to get a little bit muddy. Then we have D and F. When you get super low like this, the sounds just start to layer on top of each other, and they start to mask each other a little bit. Yeah, so you kind of have these eerie sound effects that are going on, but you've kind of panned it hard left, so it's more isolated in one ear. What I might have done is actually left it up the center, but then pulled it back in the mix with a bunch of reverb and make it a little bit more ethereal and cinematic that way. There's just a lot of things you can do. So if you're going for more of a cinematic feel, everything can be a little more cohesive and pulled together with some reverb. And again, your strings have a good amount of reverb on them. So just make sure that the other instruments complement that amount of reverb. And just double check your reverb settings in general. Yeah, so hopefully that helps, Gabriel. Great stuff. Let's move on to Youssef's Gnaoua Spirit. Here we go. I like how jumpy this is already. There's some voice effects there that are super catchy. Everything so far is well balanced. The percussion is not too loud. Voices are well placed in the mix, up center. Good production. Interesting how they're singing kind of like in octaves right now. Now the harmonic information comes in with the keyboards. This gives me like summer vibes. Nice, got some saxes. Here, I definitely want to hear some like high textures, like maybe strings or pads to accompany this little groove going on. Feels just a bit empty in the high right now. You got a nice shaker going on there, but I kind of want to sustain high texture there. Here you've left a little bit more bare, which is cool. Here we want to contrast it with more harmonic material, maybe. Nice call and response there. Cool. Yeah, first of all, the first thing that stands out to me, Youssef, is great production and great mixing. There's a lot of elements working together right now that are working super well. Melodically and harmonically, you have a pretty catchy hook going on. You have this kind of repeating hook that really goes on, so that carries the thing, carries the piece and the song throughout, which is nice. I think what the only thing that really stood out to me again is having that high pad in those thematic moments when you have that melody going on, or even when it's like just the instrumental going on. Yeah, even here. So especially with the saxophones, it's nice and jazzy in the bottom. So maybe in addition with the saxophones, you can have like maybe trumpets up in the high end doing a counter melody or a call and response with those saxophones just for a little bit more interaction. And then some high pads or even some high synths to decorate the top end in addition to the shaker and the high percussion. So yeah, I love that you have those keyboards going on in the middle, dun, dun, those kind of stabs. I would also bring in like a high texture just to fill it out a little bit more. In general, that's really the only thing that stood out to me. Yeah, and you got a nice bass line too. You might even want to bring out the bass line a touch more just to give it a little more presence and a little more fatness. But in general, great stuff, Youssef. Well done. Cool. Let's go to Liakos's piece, A Blowball After All. Ooh, interesting. Went with a B natural there. So interesting use of double notes here, like that repeated note. Strings are this low, maybe it's the cello or the double bass. It's just a little over prominent to me at the moment. So by the way, I think it's better if I just talk as I'm hearing it, just in case I don't forget anything after I hear the entire track. But yeah, just when the strings come in here, it's a little bit too loud for me. Just a touch on the loud side. And you might want to do a little bit of EQing there just to get rid of some of the presence. Right now it's a little bit overwhelming, but adjust the volume first. I like that texture there. I would probably blend it with some reverb. Just a little more reverb and make it a little quieter. Maybe it's an electric guitar thing that's happening there, I'm not quite sure. So yeah, I would just make it a bit quieter. Nice high strings. That's very clear. Cool. So yeah, in this section here, the low end is kind of just a touch too overwhelming in my opinion. There's a lot of information going on there in the low end. When the high strings come in, it makes a really nice contrast from what you had before. But every time there's kind of a downbeat going into a new chord, there's a lot of information happening there. So for example, like right there, and there was a bit of clipping there too. It might just be because let me see what happens actually if I make this a tad softer, if that helps at all. Okay, so yeah, I still hear a little bit of a clipping. It might be possible that you didn't leave enough headroom for this mix, so it probably ended up clipping a little bit, hitting 0 decibels, and that's usually the thing we want to avoid. Aside from that, yeah, just watch out some of the low end information when you have these downbeats. Like right there, it's a lot of notes. It's almost like a cluster happening there. So just be careful. If you wanted to make it more cloudy and maybe less defined, then that's totally fine. But generally, I kind of want to hear like what harmonic information is happening there. And right now, it's a touch unclear just because you have so many notes happening at the same time. And that clipping, it seems to be happening on mainly the left side. You hear that static type of sound? Or maybe it's an additional effect you added, I'm not even sure. I really like the strings. The high strings have a nice amount of reverb on them. You just want to make sure everything else is a little bit quieter. Interesting. Very cool. So yeah, good stuff, Liakos. So for me, the main thing I like to consider is balance, and especially I think it applies for this piece because like you want to make sure you know exactly which elements are the melodic elements, or I should say at least the featured elements that you want to be heard the most, and then make sure everything else is pulled down just a little bit to support that main instrument. Because whether that sound effect was clipping, like it was actual distortion because it hit 0 decibels, or you added in that effect, it gives off the impression that it is kind of like distortion because it has that crackling effect that is not necessarily desirable in a lot of modern music. So when you're producing, make sure you balance all your instruments first. Make sure that the actual levels are kind of how you want them exactly to be. So be very careful with that. And in general, I mean, you call this cinematic ambient. So a few of your instruments had a lot of good reverb on them. I would say make sure your piano, and you can automate the reverb for there as well. Like I like how it started off a little more dry, but I think later in the piece you can add a little more reverb and automate it to go up a little more. And some of your downbeats, you can also add like some splash effects in there just to give it a little bit more of a wash. Little more of an impact when it hits those downbeats. Yeah, cool. Hopefully that makes sense. Great stuff. Okay, CineGarry sends My Gentle Harp. Let's have a listen. So far, Gary, great themes, great melodic material. The timpani is a little bit loud. Percussion is just a touch loud in general. It's overloading on just a bit. This is nice. The harp seems quite far away. I wonder if you want to mic it up just a little bit closer. This is nice, adding the Glock on top. Very peaceful, very beautiful. I love those little sound effects at the back too. Awesome, Gary. By the way, I would take those sound effects and bring them down a little bit. I want the harp and the actual musical material to be the most prominent. The sound effects in the background are a little bit distracting at the moment, so just bring them down a little bit more. Just a couple quick notes here at the beginning. So this string here came in a touch unexpectedly. Like, it was a little bit loud, so I would either ride the mod wheel to make it start a little bit lower down and bring it up. Da-da. Right, it starts on that D a little bit heavy, so da-da. Wait, I'm already off of my piano. Right, you want to make sure it kind of seeps in a little bit. And if you don't have that option, if the strings only have that attack, then automate the volume to kind of start quieter and then seep in. So that's a trick you can use. And yeah, that percussion's just a touch loud. So if you want to make it sound more realistic, make sure the percussion doesn't overwhelm everything else. The timpani, like I mentioned, is already a little bit too loud, so bring that down. And then your crash, that volume is actually fine, I think, but a little more reverb might do as well. And a little more reverb on the strings too. And one of the reasons I mentioned this is because the harp already feels like it's a little further back in the room. And the harp, naturally being a quieter instrument, wants to be more featured in this piece, I think, right? So I would bring the microphone positions, or I would tweak them a little bit more so that the harp is a little more close, right? And then your other instruments, make sure they are not overwhelming the harp. Like this is all very nice, with your woodwinds as well. Right, like I love that melody, but unfortunately it was just overshadowed by the timpani and those that cascade of the bells, or whatever that is, the bell tree. Yeah, very like noble theme here. I really like what's, so again, the timpani there. Yeah, so for strings that are a little bit more static, or maybe they don't have as much of a active legato transition, that type of thing, adding a little bit more reverb to those can really help bring them back a little more and give them a more cinematic feel. So musically very strong, just watch a bit of the balances, especially volume balances, okay? Great stuff, Gary, thank you. All right, Maxime, let's hear your village theme. Here we go. Nice. Solo strings naturally have a harder time playing convincing lines, but that's okay. I like that you're repeating your theme here. Adding the string ensemble, very nice. Cool. Good stuff, Maxime. Thank you for that. So yeah, in general, your solo string, I think there are legato transitions in this instrument, right? And I think the main thing is that, to me, it feels like the string is playing a little bit late. So what I would do is actually take all that solo instrument, like maybe it's a violin or viola, and I would take all those notes and drag them back a couple of milliseconds, maybe 300 milliseconds or so, just so they kind of line up with the rest of the instruments a little bit better. And I might also give a little bit more reverb to that instrument as well. Now, I notice you have a lot of octave and unison stuff going on here. I love the chord progression. The melody is catchy. I like your structure of your piece, and I like that you're building here orchestrationally. The textures are building, but you see here how the waveform isn't that much larger. So that has, or the thing that contributes to that is, I guess twofold. Like, number one, you can ride the mod wheel a little bit higher. If there's more dynamic layers to access those instruments, I would experiment with a little bit more expression and volume in your instruments, especially when you get to this part over here. Because especially if you want to contrast it with a quiet part at the very end, then you want more growth here in the middle part. So I like your choir there. But here, really, you have like at least three groups of instruments playing the same thing. So you have your solo string, you have ensemble strings, like high violins, but you also have the voices, the choir taking over as well. I'm dying to hear a little more counter melody, a little more interest. So whether that be in the cello, whether that be in the high, like maybe second violins, maybe woodwinds, maybe even brass, feel free to experiment a little bit with counter melodies and seeing call and responses, seeing how those interact with each other, staying within the key of C minor, of course, because that's the key of your piece. But just experiment a little bit and see if you can make it even more interesting. So for me, just two main things, aside from the fact that I think the solo string should be pushed back just a little bit, or I guess I should say push forward, because we want to hear it a bit earlier. A little more reverb, and in case you're quantizing everything 100%, feel free to unquantize some of this stuff, because right now it does feel like a lot of the instruments are lining up exactly. The guitar plucks and some of the supporting instruments, they feel like they're going dead on with each other. So feel free to space them out just a little bit to make it more natural. But mainly just work on the expression a little bit more and bring up the volume of some of these instruments. And then secondly, just make sure you play around with some more orchestration. See if you can add some more lines to enhance that melody line you've already got going on. So thank you for that, Maxime. All right, Patrick, let's hear your sonnet underscore. So your solo string, or your main melody string, is very present right now, Patrick. You might want to experiment with the automation with it, the volume balances a little bit more. Nice chord progression. Nice short strings. A little more movement and flow here. a half step to B flat minor. Nice. Cool, Patrick. Just a couple things that came to mind here. So firstly, if you're trying to go for a melody that's maybe a little more memorable, like I notice here you call it underscore, so probably you wrote this to a scene or something, right? So you probably didn't want it to step on the actual scene's toes, which is totally which is what you're supposed to do. If you're going for something like a melody that's a little more memorable, I'm just remembering a part here in your melody. You have da 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 da, then you hold that, and then you go down to da, right? So when you step down in thirds like this, it's a little less memorable for the audience just because you're skipping instead of stepping. We tend to remember melodies better when they're steps or even repeated notes. I think here earlier you have some repeated notes here which sounded quite nice. So just keep in mind, like when you mix in a healthy amount of steps and skips, that's what kind of creates a memorable melody. In addition to that, play around with the rhythmic aspect of as well when it comes to the melody. So you can go da dun dun da da. Like you can shorten some notes, you can lengthen some notes to add a little bit more interest. Again, if this is just underscore, then go for it and experiment with what works with the scene. And then I think the other thing, let's see. Yeah, so your solo instrument is quite present in the mix, and naturally it has a little bit of a harsh sound to it due to the sample itself. So do some EQing to it and take out a bit of that harshness. That's what is contributing a little bit to the somewhat like static and nasal sound. So do the sweep and destroy method for this solo instrument here, and then also play around with the volume automation and the way the solo line swells and the way it comes back down. You want it to be very musical, I think. So that's also very important. Oh, and the last thing is like your chord progression is landing a lot on the 4 chord before you go back to the 1 chord. I would love to hear sometimes throwing in the 5 chord before going back to the 1 chord. It just has a bit more of a nice cadence going back. Okay, hopefully that made sense. Otherwise, really great effort, and thank you for sending this to me, Patrick. Cool. All right, let's hear Dominic's Dawn Rising. Now this one is a little bit longer and there's a little more empty space, so let me see if I can go through some parts. So we got a nice opening here. Let's keep going. Yeah, so we got like some sound designy stuff going on. So far it sounds very well produced. And you'll notice that the instruments sound like they're all belonging in the same space because they have that same sense of reverb. Nice augmented triad there before resolving back down to minor and then back to the F sharp. Some portamento in there, big slides. Nice theme in octaves. And I like how each swell is naturally getting louder and louder. So there's more leading up to it every single time. Nice use of the simple swell as well. And meanwhile, we still have the pedal tone of that D in the like the strings. It's almost like they're playing slightly randomly on the D, which is nice. It's like a pedal tone, if you will. Gorgeous. I think at this point I would love to hear even just a simple melody with all these chords. Now here's a melody starting to come in, I think. Yeah, so the melody here is getting drowned out just a little bit by your strings. So just double check the balances of the French horns there, of the horns. But otherwise, nice ostinato. Nice orchestration. So now the balances are even better because now you can hear these strings are also supporting the brass for the main theme, which is nice. Nice string counter melody. Nice woodwinds. Fluttering in the back. I would just be careful on the parnamental slides. I wouldn't put too many of those in. I know they have an emotional and passionate sound, but if we overuse them, it gets a little bit cheesy. So just be careful there, Dominic. But otherwise, very, very beautiful themes and so far. And I love your chord progressions. See those notes there? I think both of those string parts did a slide down going down to the portamento. So just try not to overuse that too much, okay? Nice percussion here. Nice crescendo there. So I would have done added even more instruments with that as well. Yeah, the thing that made it slightly anticlimactic was this cymbal hit right there. Da, da. Then you had another cymbal swell at the very end there. I would have done a cymbal swell growing all the way to the end instead of having that hit right there. Also, the other thing about the percussion is right now the percussion sounds slightly detached from the rest of the orchestra because it's so close mic'd. If you EQ a bit of the highs away and then maybe add a bit more reverb, but also a little bit of the thump in, a little bit more, it'll sound more cohesive with the rest of the orchestra. Maybe that's not what you're going for. Maybe you were trying to make the percussion sound a little bit more close mic'd and more intimate. But if it were me, that's kind of what I would do. I would make sure it's a little further back, maybe layer it in with a couple more heavy hits so you can feel the punch of the percussion underneath, but not necessarily hear it as audibly, if that makes sense. You want to feel it more rather than hear it. And we've got that little texture going on. Very nice. A couple little textures to finish it off. Beautiful. Yeah, D major is one of my favorite keys because it's just so uplifting, and when I hear D major I kind of think of like a sunny day, like everything's just opening up very beautifully. Kind of a warm texture, warm key. So yeah, very nicely done, beautiful orchestration, beautiful chord progressions, and not that much of a melody in those growing parts, but when you had the French horns coming in, that they started playing their theme, which was really nice. they were a little bit hidden, right? Just a little bit. So make sure you automate the strings so that they're not too loud when they're doing those swells. Let that theme come through a little bit more. A lot of my feedback really comes down to balance, I think, for most people. And that's with myself as well. Like when I'm writing my own pieces, I'm trying to make sure the balances are correct. And I'm, when I'm going to do a webinar actually, discussing like mock-ups and all that. But one of the main things I'm going to cover for a good mock-up is all about balance and different types of balance. So hopefully you guys stick around for that in another video. Anyway, here we go. Here is Dimitrios' Mixdown. Nice, playful so far. Little waltzy feel, very nice. Love the melody. Nice. Ooh, yeah. I love the percussion. It's so playful. Cool. All right. So, very catchy, Dimitrios. Awesome work. Classic chord progression 1 to 5, 5 to 1, and then I think it's going to 4, and then 1, 5, 1, that type of thing. So centering around the primary chords is always fun. Just be careful here when the orchestra comes in. It's a little bit overly present in my opinion, just because you have the percussion that's further back in the mix, and you have some reverb on there, which is really nice. But everything else... Actually, I like where the strings are sitting, but I feel like the brass dun 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 should be a little bit quieter, because that's the response. Just a little bit. Yeah, so some of the harmonic instruments, like the supporting instruments, are a little bit loud. And I also like that you're emphasizing the bass line, dun, like you're emphasizing the root notes of all the chords. Maybe make it less heavy-handed. Like it feels like those bass notes are slightly too much. So just be careful with the amount of instruments you're using there to outline those bass notes, those root notes. So you've got some really playful percussion going on there. So right there, the string line was covered up just a little bit because your other instruments were a little too loud. So right there, yeah, it was a little bit hard to hear because the brass was just a little bit too loud playing their counter melodies. So just be careful with that. Again, it's all about balance. Watch those volumes and make sure everything you want to hear is able to be heard. If not, double check the volume balances first and make sure those instruments are sitting exactly where they should be. So yeah, great work. All right, David sent scoring. Sorry, not scoring, soaring. Here we go. So first thing I'm noticing here, David, is that the brass is a little bit late. It sounds like it's playing a little bit late, so I would drag it back a little bit and add a little bit more reverb as well. Has a little bit of a nasal sound to it right now, so you might want to EQ some of that mid-range out, just a touch of the frequency. So far I'm loving the chord progression. Very nice melody. Nice string trills in there. I like that choir. Oh yes. So we're getting this like Mixolydian sound because we're going to the flat 7. I like the sense of space you have here in the mix. It's very nice. Very cool. Thank you, David. So yes, the thing about soaring, like when I hear the word soaring, I'm thinking wide, expansive, right? So when we hear things like that, the first thing I think of is extended triads. It sounds like there are a lot of closed triads, closed position triads being played here, especially like in the choir parts. So it feels like it's very, like it's contained and there's, like it feels relatively safe. If you take some of those notes and spread them out over a few more octaves, you will automatically get a more soaring feeling, I think. So the choir can sing a few higher notes at some points, and then also if you take the males and bring them down like an octave here or there, that can also just expand the entire like frequency spectrum just a little bit more, which is really cool. Let's see. Yeah, maybe it's just me, but like it feels like a lot of these strings here are panned slightly to the left. And what I would do is choose the main elements. Like the bass line, I would definitely leave up the middle. The ostinato, I would actually leave up the middle as well, because that's kind of an important driving part of the piece. So I think that should definitely be in the middle. And if there are multiple strings playing the ostinato, then feel free to pan some left and some right, you know? And then your brass line, which is really nice, I personally feel like it should also go up the middle. So if that's going up the middle, then some of the harmonic instruments, these supporting instruments, can go a little more left and right. That's kind of up to you. But in general, everything is sitting pretty well in terms of like volume balance wise and yeah, everything feels like it has its own sense of space, which is nice. So you've definitely worked on the panning, but just consider the positions of where you want all those instruments. Feels like the strings here in general can have a few more over to the right, or at least some more up the center, just to give it more of a firm foundation. And yeah, a lot of the strings here feel like they're kind of, they're middle C register and below. So I would actually take them up a little bit more, maybe spread them apart, just to give it a more not exotic, but a more, open type of sound. So it's pretty important. But I love your chord progression. I love the adventurous feel to it. So just keep that up and keep the string trills going. That's also very nice. Okay, finally we have Ralph's Children of the Sea. Here we go. Or maybe it's called Lost in a Frozen Dreamland. My apologies. So I'm loving this warm texture that everything's happening. And nothing is poking out to me as being too loud or too soft. So for me, the balances are all very solid right now, Ralph. So great job on that. No prominent melody here. It's just a very nice underscore type of moment. I like those high strings coming in there. Beautiful woodwinds. That's our first hint of melody that we're hearing here. Oh, that's really nice. So yeah, we get this pedal tone of C happening, giving the woodwind space to do its own thing, and our ear is only drawn to that because the bass is staying still. And now we refocus towards the middle register with the piano. And again, we're starting to grow back, which is really nice. You hear the brass, you hear the strings, also some of the woodwinds there as well, enhancing everything. I might take that woodwind there and add just a touch more reverb to it, just so it feels like it gels a little bit better with everything else. The melodic woodwind I'm talking about, like the solo one that's playing its line. Nice, going to D major. We haven't heard that before. Yeah, that's beautiful, Ralph. That's really well done. I'm thinking here I would want a kind of a cymbal swell going into this last moment. Right there. And then you have that slight crash hit there, which is nice. Yeah, overall, just really gorgeous, really well orchestrated. It's a little more mid-low focused, which is totally fine as long as it doesn't clog up the entire frequency spectrum. And then you have the occasional melody there that definitely earns its spot, while the bass line basically stays on one note, like C for the first part, and then it goes to D afterwards, which is really nice. And you have this occasional like tinkling high instrument in there too, which gives us a sense of like being in a frozen environment, like a really peaceful oasis type of thing, which I think is really nice. Yeah, I mean it's just a really well done, and I can definitely see it like as an underscore for a documentary with this type of scenery in it. And then here it definitely has a nice climactic final ending, but it's not out of place because it's relatively the same dynamic range as everything else. So that was really well done. Cool. Awesome, guys. Well, thank you so much for watching part 1 of this track review series. I hope you enjoyed it. And in part 2, we'll continue through tracks 11 through 20. So that was a lot of fun. I hope you learned something from this so far. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.